So the iPhone 15 lineup is finally here, and much like the S23 lineup, it's an evolution from last year with a few improvements and changes. So in this video, we will compare the iPhone 15 Pro Max and the S23 Ultra to find out which one is the better flagship. Now this comparison is going to be divided in 5 sections. So we'll talk about the display, the specs, the cameras, the price and other features, and ultimately which one should you buy. So to kick things off, let's talk about the displays. Now the iPhone 15 Pro Max borrows the same 6.7-inch Super Retina XDR OLED display from last year's iPhone and still has that 120Hz ProMotion display. You still get that same resolution of 2796 by 1290, creating a pixel density of 460. The bezels are also slimmer than last year, and you still have that always on display with a new standby mode, which is only limited to the Pro lineup. Now the S23 Ultra on the other hand has a massive 6.8-inch dynamic AMOLED display with a refresh rate of 120Hz. The resolution is 3088 by 1440, and you get a pixel density of 500, which is a fair bit higher than the iPhone. Now you have to note that in general, Samsung displays are known to be more vivid and saturated, and the colors pop out a little more than the iPhones. So you have to keep that in mind. But again, the slimmer bezels on the 15 Pro Max are a welcome change. Now moving on, let's talk about the specs. So the iPhone 15 Pro Max has Apple's brand new A17 Pro chip. You have the Apple GPU, you get 8 gigs of RAM, the base storage now starts at 256 and goes all the way up to 1 terabyte. You get all-day battery life because Apple does not mention a specific number for the battery capacity, and you get IP68 water and dust resistance. On the other hand, the S23 Ultra has Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, you get the Adreno 740 GPU, you get 8 gigs RAM, or you can opt for the 12 gig RAM. The storage also starts at 256 and goes all the way up to 1 terabyte and not expandable just like the iPhone. And you get a massive 5000 mAh battery, and you also get an IP certification of 68 for water and dust resistance. Now moving on, let's talk about the more interesting part of the comparison, which is the cameras on both the devices. So Apple claims that the iPhone 15 Pro Max has up to 7 cameras, although it's still 3 sensors. The other 4 cameras are created through the pre-existing sensors where you get different optical ranges and different zoom levels. So the main sensor on the 15 Pro Max is 48 megapixel compared to 200 on the S23 Ultra, which it's a ridiculously high number. Now the S23 Ultra also has a 12 megapixel ultra-wide sensor similar to the 15 Pro Max. You get a 10 megapixel telephoto and a 10 megapixel periscope lens on the S23 Ultra as well, whereas the iPhone 15 Pro Max has a 12 megapixel telephoto lens, and it uses a LiDAR sensor to provide better 3D portrait images during nighttime. Now the S23 Ultra has 8K video capabilities up to 30 frames per second, whereas the iPhone is only limited to 4K at 60 frames per second. But you have to know that that is ProRes video now as well, up to 60 frames. The S23 Ultra can also do 4K up to 60. It can do slow motion up to 960, has HDR10 plus for video, compared to only 240 frame slow motion at 1080 for the iPhone 15 Pro Max. But the iPhone 15 Pro Max, as I mentioned earlier, gets ProRes video, and you can do cinematic mode for video as well. Now coming to the front, both devices have a 12 megapixel sensor for the selfie camera. However, the 15 Pro Max can take video in 4K up to 60 frames as opposed to just 30 frames on the S23 Ultra. Now as for Apple's claim about the 7 lenses or 7 cameras you get out of the 15 Pro lineup, that is something that'll have to be tested in real life, which again will be happening really soon once we get the phones in hand. But yeah, it's good to know, and it's an interesting improvement over the previous generation iPhone. Now moving on, the S23 Ultra comes in green, cream, lavender, graphite, sky blue, lime, and phantom black, and starts at $1199 for the base 256 gig model, whereas the 15 Pro Max comes in black titanium, white titanium, natural titanium, which is more or less a gold color, and a blue titanium, and also starts at $1199 for the base 256 gig model. Now there's quite a few things you have to keep in mind about both the S23 Ultra and the 15 Pro Max. So visually, they look exactly the same as the previous generation. Of course, you get new colors and the chassis have been reshaped a little bit to give you a better in-hand feel. But yeah, that's one of the things you have to keep in mind. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because even though they look similar, they have improved from the previous generations on things that were not so good, and they have added changes which are welcome, like the USB Type-C port on the iPhone, which has finally made its way on the iPhone after years of waiting. And again, it's a really good change, it's a welcome change, and I believe it'll make the iPhone a bit more usable and a bit more accessible compared to the Lightning, because it limited the phone in many ways. So that is a welcome change. The iPhone 15 Pro lineup also has a new titanium chassis, so that's going to be a bit more stronger, and the phone's going to be a bit more lighter. So that's also a welcome change. And you also have an action button as opposed to the mute switch on the side, much like the Apple Watch Ultra. So you can map it to either put your phone on mute, or you can map it to open a shortcut on an application. So good and a welcome change in the iPhone. But yeah, the question still remains, which one should you buy? Now this does come down to preference again, because if you are in that Apple ecosystem and you're looking for an upgrade, then you cannot go wrong with the 15 Pro Max. It's Apple's flagship and it's the best one they make. Similarly, the S23 Ultra, if you are in that Samsung ecosystem with Samsung DeX and just Samsung Watch and devices, then the S23 Ultra is the flagship and is the best phone you can purchase from Samsung at the moment. And again, it does come down to preference. And if you're looking to shake things up, either of these phones are really amazing and you cannot go wrong with either of them. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope you guys enjoyed that video, and if you did, give it a big thumbs up. Thanks again for watching, and stay tuned for more, because a lot of iPhone 15 and iOS 17 stuff coming really soon. So stay tuned. Until then, please like, comment, and subscribe. Peace.